the highway. Alrighty. Whew, there we go. Alright. Delivered a load to Medina, somewhere near Toledo. No, I deadheaded to Medina and I brought a load back up by Ann Arbor and dropped that. Spent last night in Ann Arbor. It rained really hard, really rough last night. And now I just picked up a little box, tiny little box, like a shoebox, in Dearborn, Michigan, and I'm taking it to Liberty, Missouri, which is my current target. And I had some delays getting it on board, but I finally have it and I'm going. It looks like I'm going to be there late tonight, being that it's a Ford plant. They're usually open 24 hours. This doesn't require a forklift because I think it weighs 5 pounds. So that'll be easy enough. So I am west on 94 in Michigan, heading towards the west side of Michigan, then we'll follow that down around through Chicago and then cuts through Iowa, and I don't know how it gets there. Anyway, the topic of today is, I call it the playground. And the playground would be where you were born and how you were brought up is directly proportionate to where your parents put you there. It's usually their experience that turns into your experience by default. A person that was raised on a farm will have very distinct farm memories, and I have a check engine light on. That's not a good sign. Let's see if that resets. A person that's born on a farm, raised on a farm, is going to have an experience of being out in the country, and they're going to have the barn and the tractors and the pigs and the chickens and all the space and the wheat fields or corn or whatever it is they have. And usually there's railroad tracks involved. So people who grow up on a farm will have that experience. They live it, and it's not unusual to them because they've seen it so many times. It's just a day in the life. But to somebody from the outside, it's different, and it's exciting, and it's unusual. And it's going to be like a kid grew up in the big city, and their parents own the cafeteria or the delicatessen at the bottom floor. They dealt with the rush of people and the regulars and the weirdos that came in there late at night and all those. What's up there? How you doing? Talking about growing up. And then, everybody kind of has their background. Well, my dad was an airline pilot. So I come from an airline family. So my experience growing up was literally, my playground was the airport. And my parents got divorced in the 1970s. So we bounced back and forth between their houses. And as a little kid, I lived in California. And as a bigger kid, I lived in Colorado. And my dad lived between Reno and Honolulu. So growing up, this is perfectly normal. On Friday after school, we were little kids, we would leave, living in the San Francisco area, jump on a plane and fly to Honolulu. And spend the weekend and come home Sunday night and go back to school on Monday. And to us that was, hey Sam, what's up? I'm on 94 West going through Michigan, heading towards Liberty, Missouri with a little tiny box on board right now. And I have a check engine light that just came on, and I didn't want to see that, but it's there glowing at me. And I don't have a little tester. And the thing about this may have changed, but back in the day, if you were related to an airline employee, you could fly for free. You were considered a non-revenue passenger, and the word was non-RAV. And you could fly space available. They wouldn't bump a paying passenger to let you go in, so you were kind of at the whim of availability on flights. And of course, we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have computers, and we didn't have, all that fun stuff back then. So when you would want to see, yesterday's talk was interesting. I try to come up with interesting stuff, Sam. It's on top of my head. But back in the 70s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all that stuff. If you wanted to check on a flight, you had to call a 1-800 number or something and ask questions. But the first words out of your mouth were, I'm a non-RAV, and then you would go from there, and they would see what was available. So my brother and I bounced around airports as kids, and we got understanding how airports operated so well that it kind of became a playground. I'm talking about, I was 9 years old and my brother was 11, and we would be cut loose in a big international airport. And the security that we go through today is not unlike the 70s. And to put it nicely, in the 70s it was a joke. And you could get around and through how to bypass everything and not have to deal with any of that. These are things you're figuring out as a child. Now, today at an airport, when an employee wants to go into that secured room, they have that little pass on the little zip pass on their belt, and they pull it out, and they swipe it, and it, beep, and they go in. Well, back then, they had a giant brass lock that looked like, almost like a telephone, old push-button phone, a rotary, and they would walk up and put in a code and then turn this big knob, and it'd go click, and the door would open, and they'd go in. Well, for your information, when they used to have those, every airport that we ever set foot in the United States, the code was 135. I'm 9, and I figured that out. So when we were bored, and we were bored a lot, we would literally let ourselves through those doors and go downstairs and see what was going on. We would literally run around the base of the airport, and people would see us, and they would assume we deserved to be there, or we were supposed to be there, because we acted like we owned the place. We used to find lounges and finger foods, and we just run around. It was a playground for us. Flying, and because my parents, for instance, we lived in the San Francisco area when I was little, and my dad was in Honolulu. We would fly Space Available back and forth, but we would spend a lot of time at the airport waiting on an empty flight. And then when I was 11, I think, we moved to Colorado, and my dad flew for Western, which turned into Delta Airlines later, but he flew for Western, and Western's hub was Salt Lake. And if you look at a map, San Francisco, we draw a beeline to Denver, and Salt Lake was in the middle, so we would be trying to get on a flight in San Francisco, to get to Denver, and we would say, okay, we can't get a direct. We would book a flight to Salt Lake, to their hub, and then try to catch a flight out of there, and it was, you would be stuck there for hours. And in the 1970s, you got to remember, computers were new. That was a whole new concept, and the computers didn't have passwords. They didn't have login. You just turned it on and went to town. Now today, if you go to the airport and you go down Concourse B and you go to gate 17, there's a little passageway to get on the plane, but that little counter had a computer behind it. I guess they do now. But back then they had those primitive computers that if you knew what you were doing, you could literally log into it and make yourself at home. So here we are, children, not even teenagers. You walk up to an empty counter, walk behind it, turn on the computer, and you can dig around in there and find flights and how many seats were available on the flight. And to think about that now, you look back and I scratch my head and go, I can't believe we did that. Well, to us, because that's what we did for years, that was perfectly normal. People just sort of stare at me when I tell them about that. And as a non-RAV, you again are flying Space Available, and you are the lowest priority. And the other people were flying Space Available, so you wouldn't be the only person. There might be 10 people non-RAVs, depending. And if you were a single person, your chances of getting on a flight were a whole lot more likely if you were a family. Imagine if there was 3, 4, 5 of you standing there. You're not going to get you got to have a real empty flight to get on, so it was a challenge. And there was this one time, my brother and I pulled this, and I don't remember where we landed, but it was semi-late at night. And we landed at an airport, and we were way down the end of a concourse, and it might have been Salt Lake, and we had to get off the plane, run all the way down the concourse to the terminal, cross over to a different concourse, and race back up the other side to the end of the other concourse to get on the flight, to get in line to be the non-RAV. And there were other non-RAVs on the plane because we knew about it. And it's first come, first serve, and I think all of us were trying to go the same direction. And my brother and I got on almost last on this first plane, and we were way behind the lines. We were like way in the back. And you know how long it takes to get out of an airplane? So we're getting off almost last, and the people that are 100 yards ahead of us are obviously going to be able to check in before we are, and we're going to get bumped. So my brother and I, using our ninja skills, entered the secure area, dropped down to the bottom floor, went out the back door, ran through the parking area, you know, where the planes come in and pull up to the gates. It's dark out, and we ran across that area to the other concourse, came in under the basement, and came up, and we're front line. And we were checking in with the first people that were racing to meet everybody, walked up behind us, and they're staring at us like, how'd you do that? And I sit back and look at that as an adult, and I go, that was insane that we did that stuff, but that was normal back then. When we would travel with my father, we simply bypassed security. We would go around it. I remember one time we were on a plane, and my dad had his little suitcase, and he pulls it out, and we're on the plane, and he opens the suitcase, and his little .38 caliber handgun is sitting there, and he slammed the case, and he goes, oh, I forgot I had that, and he put it back under the case. Another time we went to Alaska, and we had some 12-gauge shotguns, and they went around security in a gun case, and they put them up in the cockpit. They left them in the cockpit. We got off the plane, they handed us, walked off the plane. So we're walking past security, outbound, carrying shotgun cases. You know, obviously gun cases in our hand, and the security people are looking at us going, wait a minute. And we're getting off the plane. And again, at the time, no big deal. And I compare that to what other people would tell me, and I had talked about this earlier, but I had a guy I went to high school with who grew up in West Berlin, and the island behind the Iron Curtain, you know, surrounded by a wall, concertina wire, and guards who keeping an eye on the situation. And the subway system in Berlin went under East Berlin. It actually traveled all the way around and came back. And there were apparently 2 stations on that subway line that were on the other side of the fence. And the train would go through this tunnel, and it would get close to those stations, and it would slow down, and it would go through a walking speed. And there would be guards standing there staring at you when it went by, armed guards. And then it would go by the other station, and it would keep going slow, and then it would speed back up and do its regular thing. Between the 2 stations, people, and this was just like getting up, grabbing the newspaper in the morning, when they would go between the stations on each car, on one side, the side away from the station, people on board the train would get up and physically force the side doors open. And he would, while he's a little kid, he's watching this, they'd open the side doors, and they'd go between the stations before they got to the second one, they let the door close. He goes, and every once in a while, somebody would jump out of the darkness and get on the train with them, and they let the door close behind them. These are people escaping East Germany. He goes, and it was, people just did it. It wasn't like there was a sign. Everybody knew that this is where somehow they would get into the tunnel system, and they would want to jump on the train, so they would open the door in case there was somebody there. And he goes, it wasn't every day, but there were days when people got on. He goes, he saw it. He'd be like, whatever. You know, they'd sit down, everybody act cool, and they'd go by the second station, and they'd go to West Berlin and get out. And he goes, and it was just a day in the life. And I'm looking at this guy going, dude, that is a really cool thing to have on your resume to have been around that. I have a load on board. Quick backtrack here. Picked up in Dearborn. I have a little box. It's the size of a box, maybe boots, but it's some kind of label. I'm running it to Liberty, Missouri. We are west on I-94 in Michigan, making a beeline towards Lake Michigan. Then we'll turn south, skirt the lake, kind of, I guess, zigzag through Chicago and pop out on the other side. And this shows me getting there about 11 o'clock tonight. Had a lot of delays today. The topic, another little topic I'd like to go over that's been brewing in my head is the cell phone. And when I look at I have what's called YouTube Studio, and it tells you where all my, or the viewers are coming from, but more importantly, it tells me the age group. And the age group is 35, 45 up. It's older people, which is kind of interesting, which helps me talk about this. The cell phone. And most of you remember the time before cell phones. Young people have no concept for it. The first time I ever saw the concept of a non-landline phone was on a TV show that was shot in the early 70s, and it was some police drama or something. There was a guy driving in the old Galaxy 500. Dude, it was probably 40 years old that looked 65. He's wearing a fedora. And he's got some young, hot, sexy thing sitting next to him. And you hear a phone ring, and from somewhere next to the seat, he comes up with a phone, a receiver, the old rotary phone handset, and he lifts it up and he starts talking into it. And this girl is like, ooh, oh, that is so cool. And I'm looking at that going, is that even real? Which, from 1972-ish, that movie looks like it was from, I'm going to say no, that was probably just noise. But the first cell-type phone, car phone I ever made encounters with was a friend of the family. Russ Barker had a pickup truck, an old 70s truck. I was a kid, and I was walking in front of the truck. There's nobody in it, and the horn honked. Scared the absolute crap out of me. I'm looking around, and Russ comes walking out, opens the door, and answers a phone, and I'm like, whoa, what the, that's space age stuff. But that was the first time I was ever encountered the concept of a phone that operated away from a handset or a plug on the wall. And that was any time. We had just started getting with cordless phones. That was like the new thing, but actual phones that could operate independent. And the loops they worked on were very, very small. When I was first in high school, I remember an idiot that had an old rotary phone in his locker, and between classes, he would pull this out and act like he's talking on it, and he thought he was cool. I'm like, oh yeah, dude, that's like totally legit. He just thought he was cool, standing there talking into this receiver. The first time I ever saw somebody with a bag phone, remember those? You ever watched the movie Lethal Weapon? Danny Glover's using one. I was at a 7-Eleven near Fort Hood, Texas, and some cheeseball, I was on my motorcycle, and some cheeseball pulls up in a Chevy Chevette. Remember those? He's in a Chevy Chevette with mag wheels, because he's cool. And he gets out, and I just happen to be staring in his direction, and he hops out, and he starts looking around. As soon as he gets out, stands up, his head's on a swivel. He's looking around. Then he gets out of the car, carrying a bag phone, and he walks into the 7-Eleven, and I'm getting gas, and I'm walking in behind him, and he's looking around the whole time. He's walking, he's looking. So I go in behind him, and I'm paying for gas. I bought something, and he's in line in front of me, and he takes the time to walk up. He's buying like nothing, and he took the time to walk up to the counter, set the phone down, and start dialing something, and you can hear it. And then, of course, he changes his mind and hangs up, and then struts out like he's a big-time operator. Back then, the cost of making a cell phone call was catastrophic, so he wasn't calling anybody. He was just letting everybody know how cool he was. And then they came out with the brick. Remember that one, the big fat one that was standalone? It would actually stand by itself on the counter. I knew a guy that had been, for a very short period of time in his life, he was a drug dealer. And all the dope fiends he knew would call that phone, and they had tweakers, the guys that are wired up on meth or whatever it is called. And he said every time somebody called his number, whether or not he answered it cost 25 cents. And he said these tweakers would hit that phone, bing, 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 and he'd get the phone bill and fall out of his chair because he hadn't talked to anybody. It was that bad, and he said it was absolutely mind-boggling, and he ended up getting rid of the phone. But that was the brick. And then later on, it came to the Nokias were the thing. They were kind of smaller, and you had to pull the antenna out. They were analog phones. The batteries didn't last that long, and it used an analog system. And it seems like you had limits on how much talk time you had, depending on the time of the day, and you would pay more for more minutes, and that was kind of a thing. And then in the late 90s, they started doing that analog/digital. That was the, ooh, look at me, it does both. And then the technology eventually changed until everything was digital. And everybody was like, wow, this is like the greatest thing ever, having digital phones. And people are looking around today, don't notice this, but when people first started driving their cars and talking on their phones, they weren't trained how to do it. They couldn't do it. You'd be driving with your friend and their phone would ring and they'd hold it up their ear and all of a sudden they start slowing down. It's like they couldn't disconnect their mouth from the steering wheel. And they started having all these problems with driving and changing lanes and not wanting. They just couldn't do it. And it took some time before people finally figured out how to drive and talk. This is before Bluetooth, when they had that. I like the flip phones because all you had to do was grab your thumb and just go whoop and it was on. You know, remember, that's your thumb and you didn't have to push a button or anything. Those were my kind of the ones I liked. And right before, and then of course the Razr phone came out around there, but right before the smartphone came out, they had those ones with the keyboards. If you remember the phone, you would hold it with two hands and you would take your two thumbs and push and it would like snap in half, kind of flip open in half. And there was a keyboard that you would text on with or type with your thumbs, and you could actually feel the key so you wouldn't be hitting the wrong key. That was actually my favorite phone that I had. And I had those for, oh God, I had it for years. And I finally got my first smartphone a long time ago. And I had the phone for 7 years until it died. And it seems like phone technology was changing really fast and people were losing their minds over, I got to have the latest, greatest thing. And there was a commercial on TV about it, and it was advertising the newest whatever phone. And this guy said, oh, the new XP 3000 model came out, but it looks just like the last model. And some guy looked panicky and he said, well, if I have that one, how will people know? Like, that was the whole point of it. Ooh, look at me, I got the newest phone. I'm like, who cares? But that was what they marketed it on. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And I'm like, okay, so I got this phone that died after 7 years, and it was so ancient by phone standards that everybody in the shop passed the phone around to look at it. They were like they found an artifact or something. They were just mesmerized when I got that. The problem with cell phones and this type of technology today, I think, is I'm a Gen X, and when we were kids, we would sit around with our friends and talk and hang out. Nowadays, kids sit around with their friends and play with their phones. They're not really interacting with each other. They're just occupying the same space. And there's a disconnect at this point, and I don't know if this is ever going to get any better unless technology goes down. It's like when I was kids, we all knew our neighbors. We were all in and out of our neighbors' houses and lives, and we would eat over at their house, and they would eat over at our house. The kids would move in mass from house to house. We all, we interacted with them. The last, 25 years, who knows their neighbors anymore? I mean, you know them in passing, but you don't hang out. You don't go in their houses. They don't come in your house. I mean, we're all kind of doing our own thing now. And 2007, they had a really nasty storm beach in. It may have been a hurricane, but it was in Texas. And the power grid, we're 100 miles from the coast, but for some reason the power grid was down by the coast. So every time a big storm came in, we lost power. And our power got knocked out for 5 or 6 days. That was the first time I met most of my neighbors, because we were all outside our houses. And we had a generator in one of the brand new, those super high efficiency washer dryers were kind of a new thing. And we were able to produce enough power to run the washing machine and dryer. So we had a sign in our yard, and we were offering to do people's laundry. Just, bring over what you have, we'll wash it for you. And then one guy had a gas water heater as opposed to everybody else's electric, and he could make hot water, and then he was able to top it off, and he would make coffee. And he would drive around in the mornings to everybody's house, knock on our door, and pour coffee, fill up coffee cups and stuff, which was kind of cool. But minus that storm, we never talked to each other. We actually started interacting with each other because we didn't have technology, if that makes sense. Technology separating us. And that's how different the world is now. Everybody just kind of does their own thing, and we don't mix and match with our friends and our neighbors as much. And I kind of miss that. I miss that a lot. But what are you going to do about it? But we are all so addicted to technology right now that you can literally be in your car driving across North Dakota at 100 miles an hour, having a phone call and talking to somebody through your Bluetooth, and they live in Norway, and the call drops, and we think we have the right to be mad about it. And that's where we've ended up at this point in our civilization. So, technology good? Technology bad. I don't know. That's what I was thinking of. I did my pickup this morning with this load, and it turned out to be a complete nightmare. It's from an assembly plant, and they give you an address and kind of give you a heads up what you're going in. It's a box that weighs 4 pounds, and the address is the front gate of the facility, and it's square mile. Oh, it's one of ours. Square miles of the plant. It just goes on forever and ever and ever. But underneath the address was a bunch of code letters like 3G09FR, and that means something to them. It doesn't mean anything to me, but it means something to them. And I go to the gate and I said, I'm supposed to pick up a package, and this is all the information I have is, the address of this code. He goes, oh, that's this building over here. So I drive to this building over here, and you look for shipping, receiving, or the ramps, or the docks, or the doors. You kind of do the routine. Well, driving around it, I'm not seeing it, but I am seeing a lot of doors that says truck drivers do not come in here. Okay, drive a little further. Doors, big sign: truck drivers do not come in here. Okay. And you see 3 or 4 more of those. Then a sign says, see the clerk. Okay, where's the clerk? And at no point is there any indicator of where the clerk is located. It's just an endless supply of, keep moving. And I started asking people, pointing, and I'm driving around. Still can't find where I'm supposed to be going. And I ended up talking to enough people that I got to talk to a shipper receiver guy, but it was actually for a completely different company on the same grounds. They sent me back somewhere. I ended up calling my dispatch, and I said, all right. What are we doing here? I can't find, no one knows what's going on. So they give me an address to go to, and I drive to this different address, which is off the property, and I follow right till it zeroes out. It's at a closed train yard. I went, dude, this ain't it. So they give me a pin drop, and I go talk to another person, completely off the plant property, and they give me a map and tell me to go right back to where I was. I said, I was just there. This is the problem. There's nobody here to talk to. There's no shipping. And then she made some phone calls, and I'm sorry, I meant over here, and it was like a completely different building. And they gave me the little road map, and I zigzag over. And finally, oh yeah, we've been waiting for you. I said, dude, I've been looking for you for the last hour and 45 minutes, literally. And I finally picked up the package, and then I get going down the road, and 20 minutes later, I get a call to confirm what the part is, and I have to pull off the side of the road and get the box out and look at it, and I'm going, they're going to send me back. They didn't, so I was able to escape. And wow, that was the most painful pickup I have ever done in this line of work. Whew. So I am heading to Liberty, Missouri to drop my load off, and if they don't have anything for me going south, I'm going to deadhead back to Texas. The front end of my van is making funny noises. I hit a bump, and slowly go bump, and the front end starting to rattle. And in the old days, it was a spring with a shock. The spring holds the load, the shock slows the spring down. Where you at? Oh, I'm on Interstate 94 westbound between Detroit heading towards Lake Michigan and then turning south to Chicago. I'm following this to Liberty, Missouri. And I looked up under the van, and this doesn't have the spring shock combo. It's a strut, so it's a one-piece combo. And this van, as I'm looking at the odometer, has 149,000 miles on it, so the struts are just shot. I mean, they've lived their life and they're dead, so they're not doing their job and that's why everything's rattling around. And it started a few days ago, and it's getting louder. So I went online last night and ordered some shocks. Oh, from India. Hey, that's cool. Hey, what time is it over there? It's 2 o'clock here. So I'm going to get this thing home. I got a check engine light. That's probably a sensor because the van's not doing anything weird. And I ordered those. Wait a couple days, and I'm going to get those bolted in, which is the new systems. It used to have to, there was like a grappling system that would have to squeeze your springs. They don't do that anymore. It's just bolt in at this point. 11:30 p.m. Wow. Well, that's the middle of the night over there. Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I've had people from Berlin jump in here and New Zealand and all over the place, but not India before. That's cool. Well, this is what it looks like over here. It's the highway's a little more crowded than I remember it being in this area. Oh. Whew. Yeah, there's a lot of cars on the road right now for the time of day it is. A lot of cars. Your driving culture was super cool. Yeah, this country was, whereas like in Europe, for instance, they had public transportation and rail systems were built up because I think the real estate is a smaller area. It's a lot better organized. And, this is, you look at the United States and look at the state of Texas. If you pick up the state of Texas and drop it over Western Europe, it's like putting a tablecloth over it. It'll cover the whole area. So that's just one state because this is so spread out. They just never really got the infrastructure put in for other types of travel. And by the time they started doing it, cars hit the mainstream and everybody drives. We, last month, the wife and I we flew to Chicago, jumped on a train, and rode to Seattle, not because we needed to, because we wanted to. We got a sleeper car and rode that. And again, it was because we wanted to go on that trip. It wasn't a necessary thing, and it's not the fastest way of getting there either. Let's see if I got it. There we go. And there's a lot of cars on the road right now. This is kind of weird for this area. I don't know how they drive in India, but I can tell you this. About a year and a half ago, the wife and I went down to Mexico. We were in Puerto Vallarta. And in the United States, they drive symmetrically. Straight line, hard angles. In Mexico, they drive like water going down a river with rocks in it. The cars bend around and twist to get really, really close to each other, but it's not like you're threatening the guy next to you. Everybody does it kind of together. It's like water in a stream. It's a whole different style, and it's fascinating if you're not used to it. And I don't know how they drive in India. I've never noticed it. I just see everything you see about India just shows a lot of people, but they don't show a lot of that other than the trains. I know you have trains, and I know from the videos that people they get on top of the train, which is kind of cool. Not safe, but cool. Yeah, it's different here. In Saudi Arabia, talk about driving. Right now, I am driving a Ford Transit 250 van. This is my work van. At the house, we have a Kia Soul. We bought it new 11 years ago. But in Saudi Arabia, the driving culture of that area was absolutely hysterical. We were in a taxi cab. They don't use their turn signals. They don't use the gas pedal. They don't use the brake. They don't use the steering wheel. They drive by horn. They got one hand on the wheel, one hand on the horn, and they go around a corner, nee, 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 go around the next corner, nee, 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 going, nee, nee. I said, what? Oh, that letting people know I'm coming. And they just drive around honking the horn, and then we're laughing. On the radio, we said, what? He goes, the car's broken. What's wrong? The horn doesn't work anymore. This guy wouldn't drive without the horn working. And he waited for another car, and we jumped in and took. Yes, they need to linger before somebody hits the horn. But yeah, honking in North Korea, I'd like to find some videos of that. There was a video that I thought was really cool, shot in India, and it was a train, and these people have these stores and vendors that are right up against the train tracks. I mean, like right up against it. And this guy was selling fruit, and the train goes flashing past, and people would reach out the windows and grab stuff and just rip it off the display on the way by. And it would happen enough where the owner would hold a big knife, and he would stand in front of his display and hold the knife up. And by the time you got past the knife, you were past his display. You just hold it up. If you're going to reach out, you're going to stab yourself with this hand. It worked. People wouldn't be reaching over. Good security system. The only consistent use of honking in the States that I've seen is when you're sitting in a traffic light and the light turns green, and you know for a fact the person in front of you is playing with their phone and they're not looking, and you got to hit the horn just to get them to start moving. That's kind of ridiculous, but it's real common around here. It's showing 82 degrees outside right now. I don't like that check engine light. Anybody have a question, comment, or a topic? I like to do these when people join in and come up with stuff to talk about. Heard about the Carla. Heard about the Kerala, that word Kerala, a perfector. I don't know what that is. You hear about the? Is it Kerala? Kerala, a perfecture? No, I don't even know what that is. Is that a person or a thing? The lighting in here is really weird. It makes it hard to read the little tiny writing at the bottom of the screen. It's a state of India. It's a state. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. The safest one. Okay, yeah. Every place has got those areas that are dangerous and places that are safe. No, I'm not familiar with it. I don't know very little about India. I know the British were there, made it a colony until 1947, and that was like the biggest one that said, "Okay, we're done. Get lost." That's about the most I know about that. Is that where you live, in that area? I don't like India, not much. Well, do you live there? Or you live somewhere else? Oh, you live there. Okay. Well, everybody, you live somewhere, it becomes familiar, and you're going to find things about it you don't like. Okay, you live in that state. That's cool. It's like the United States. You can bounce around, and things change wildly as you move around here, and you can find it being completely different in different areas. Some it's the terrain and the climate. Some it's the people, and other ones it's the politics. It's wildly varied around here. We live in Texas. It gets miserable hot in the summer, but their taxes are low, the real estate prices and the cost of living are low, and the politics are kind of along our lines of thinking. It's very pro-business. I like living there, wide open roads. The kind of work I do with this van, for the most part, is in the northeast part of the United States. And that's where all the production and industrial areas are located for the most part. And it's usually jumping around over there is how we earn our living. But there's a lot of toll roads, and because of the climate and the winters, the freezing winters and the snows, it tears up the roads. So a lot of the roads in that part of the country can be rough. Living cost increasing and basic salary is very low. Yeah, rarely does your paycheck keep up with inflation. Rarely. And yeah, and everywhere you go, and if you find some place that's not terribly expensive to buy and to live, people have a tendency to flock to it, which drives up demand, which drives up the prices. And that's pretty much true everywhere in the world, unfortunately. There's a lot of Americans who retire and they move overseas. It's called expatriating. They go somewhere, and by them kind of telling their friends about it, and everybody floods there. They go, "Oh, the prices are low and the real estate isn't terribly expensive. Oh, it's wonderful." Well, then everybody and their brother goes there. There was a time when everybody was moving to Mexico, but all these areas they moved into, they pushed the price up. And then for quite a while, Costa Rica was a destination for everybody. Oh my God, Costa Rica, cost of living, real estate. Well, they ran that into the mud. And then in the last few years, Portugal, off of Spain, Portugal became the retirement haven. Everybody packed their bags and ran to Portugal. Well, that's now getting burned out. The prices are going up, and it causes the locals to pay more money, and it's pissing the locals off. It's just every time they find a good place to go, it goes up. Everybody's got to go there. So now you got to weed through the remnants to see what you can find. But yeah, the cost of living and the cost of getting paid are not good. And I imagine India with a population. How about Japan? As far as going to Japan, they aren't real big on people moving to Japan. Japan is not a nation that likes having immigration. I mean, let's face it, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb unless you happen to look like a local. But they aren't real big on letting people in. And Japan has half the population of the United States, and their country is slightly smaller than California. So it's getting a little crowded over there at this point, and I don't know if that's really the place you want to go. And not unlike the Netherlands isn't an immigration because the Netherlands is not that big, and they got a lot of people living there, and I don't know what their plan is, and they don't have enough room for what they already have. So the idea of migrating to the Netherlands is probably not going to work out if anybody's going to try it. You look at the United States, it's fairly big, and then you take the state of Alaska and you bring it down to the United States and lay it over the country, and it's like half the landmass. And Alaska is mostly wide open, but it's a real harsh area to live in unless you're in one of the cities, one of the few big cities. But there's a lot of real estate up there not being used. Yeah, you travel the United States. I don't think you could take it in all at once because you can bounce around to different areas, and the terrain is different, the culture is different. If you speak English well enough, you can catch accents they're funny as far as I'm concerned. You have a kind of a neutral accent, and then I used to work down in the Gulf of Mexico with people who lived in Louisiana, and you start talking to them, and they talk back at you like this, and I start laughing at them because you're not supposed to talk like that. And then you go up to New England, and these These guys will talk to you with an accent that you can cut with a knife as it's coming out of their mouth, and you start laughing because it just sounds great. But if you bounce around the United States, it's the culture. It's a shared culture, but each area is very distinct in how they do things and how they act and how they respond. And something as simple as this, in New York, the concept of barbecue. In New York, barbecuing or to barbecue is a verb. In Texas, barbecue is a noun. New Yorkers say, we're going to barbecue, and they say, what are you going to barbecue? And you describe what you're having. In Texas, you say, what's for dinner? We're having barbecue. That's all you have to say, because you know it's going to be what products are going to be involved in it. You don't have to break it down, if that makes any sense. It's just a different concept of how you do things, and what they value and everything. I had a job. They say the earthy fruit and nut sandal wearing people live in Seattle, whatnot. And I was going for work, and I flew up to Seattle, and I used an Uber, and they said, you need to go to the Uber pickup area, which is pretty busy. And the guy said, okay, your Uber's there. And I said, what's he driving? They said, a blue Prius. Do you know how many blue Priuses they have in Seattle? I can tell you this, there were 6 of them in the Uber parking area. So you're going to have to narrow it down a little bit there, buddy. Hey, Dave, what's up? Southern California, what's up, Mr. Dave? I know the cost of living down there is really high. Nice area, though. Nice area. Yeah, we've been babbling about whatever. Hey, Dave, we're on Interstate 94 in Michigan. There's a sign. Westbound. I'm driving from Dearborn, which is Detroit subsidiary. And I am, get rid of Gavin Newsom. I hear you. I'm heading to Liberty, Missouri with a box that's the size of a shoebox. Some kind of car part. I don't know what it is. Yeah, Gavin Newsom. I haven't heard anything positive about him. Not one word. And that big fire you guys had, you had somebody getting paid $700,000 a year for the sole purpose of being in charge of the fire hydrants, and they go open them up and there's no water connected to them. I'm like, wow. The little town next to me had one traffic light. And about 25 years ago, a guy came in and opened a little factory that hired like 2 people. And he built his factory in a little tiny, not even a town, it was a village. The village council said, because of the zoning laws, you have to have a fire hydrant within a certain distance of your building. And he's like, okay, put in a fire hydrant. Oh no, you have to pay for the fire hydrant. So they charge this sap $20,000 to put a fire hydrant in. Time goes by and he has a fire. Fire truck shows up, hooks up with the fire hydrant, no water. They moved it around, they pulled it out of the ground. It wasn't connected. Why do they keep re-electing Gavin Newsom? I am, inbound. Moving over. Yeah, I got, my van has 149,000 miles on it, and last 10 minutes I got a check engine light to come on. That's not a good sign. I'm hoping it's a sensor, because I had lost, okay, I gotta speed up now. Here we go. Come on. Okay, gotta go even faster. There, how about that? 80 miles an hour fast enough for you? I have the sensors that tell you your tire pressure. Every one of them have died slowly. I have a sensor that tells me my brake pads are worn out. They don't work. They always tell me my brake pads are worn out. So I spent almost $400 on discs and brakes and all the equipment to replace everything, and we put it up on the jack stand, pulled the wheels off, and the brakes are fine. So it's the sensor. So I'm hoping my check engine light's a sensor or something over here. Nothing serious. And sometimes when you get a check engine light, when you shut the vehicle off and turn it back on again, the light will go out. It's like it's a self-test. That happens also. So I'm not gonna sit here and cycle the motor, but I'm gonna hope it corrects itself here next time around. Vehicle modification is a crime here. When police get caught, they will give you a penalty. For what kind of vehicle mods? People do all kinds of crazy stuff here. The one that they dislike the most, the one that gets you in trouble, are emissions related. But as far as people will change their vehicles a lot, they just don't mess with the emissions part. It depends on what you're trying to do to it also. The police love to say, oh, you have a high performance car, you have a modified exhaust, and it's factory. It's just an excuse to pull you over and write you a ticket. But I've seen people have to deal with that. Yeah, but I got to get this one looked at. Okay. The only thing I did to my wife's car, which we bought new 11 years ago, it's got the sunroof in it that's glass. That's like the entire roof that you can open. Oh, even extra lights. Well, that's kind of normal. There's certain lights you can use, certain ones you can't. It depends on what state you're in. It's weird. Yeah, the window tinting is normal. There are legal limits to tinting, and every state is different, which is weird. Some states don't have any limits, but most of them have some type of a limit to it. I think Oklahoma, you can only put it on a recreational vehicle, like an RV. Like you can't put it on a car. And California has this weird thing where you can't put it on the front windows, the driver passenger windows, which is the number one window you want it for. Which I don't get that. Of course, the police have it on their cars, and it's illegal tint, but hey, their police are beyond the law. Yeah, making a loud exhaust is kind of annoying. Doing this job, I sleep in the van. I have a bunk back in here, and you pull in. If it's really, really hot, and late at night, you don't want to set up the generator and everything, air conditioner, and you just let the engine run and run the air. And I've pulled in. It's quiet, except the one guy with the loud exhaust pipe pulls in, and he sits there and goes blah 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 all night long, and you're like, really, dude? Then you got to drive and go park somewhere else because you don't want to listen to it. So you can't do anything to your car over there. Is what you're saying? Wow. Wow. What fun? That's not any fun. Stock, just completely stock. That would put half the businesses out, because most people do a little this, a little of that to their car. It's pretty common over here. There's a long shot right there. I keep asking our dispatcher to give me a California run. They haven't given me one in a while. I like my big cross-country drives. But first, I got to get this thing fixed. Stop. Oh, that's boring. Oh, there's one. Hold on a second. 16.2. Gotta call this one out.
What in the fuck are you doing?
We got Highway Patrol in the median, marker 116. And car has low headlight. At stock and can't add a little light. You don't have high beam, low beam on your cars over there? That's not a thing? I thought that was like standard equipment. Yeah, I had a truck yesterday. I was streaming, and I was on I-80 in Iowa. And I-80 has 3 lanes to play with. And I guess every country has their rules, but the right lane is for the people going the slowest. The center lane are for people that are moving along, but they stay over to the right lane. And then the far left lane is the one for passing and people that are, hauling ass. So I'm over in the right lane doing my thing, and there's a guy in the middle lane, a big truck, kind of passing me. And then I have a big truck come rolling up behind me, blowing his horn and flashing his headlights at me. I'm looking at him in the mirror. I'm like, okay. He's running up on my bumper, blowing that horn and just going and going. And finally the guy next to me gets past and he goes around me. He's up there cussing me out. And I'm looking at this guy. And that is another rejected phone call. I get a lot of them. Yeah. It says that's happening when I add aftermarket light into. That's bizarre. A lot of that stuff, a lot of the lighting and a lot of the stuff you add is a safety thing. Wow, that's bizarre they do that. Alright, we're still motoring. Ooh, 28 miles, alright. Yeah, there's a lot of cars on the road right now. A lot. This is, for this time of day, and for where we're located, there shouldn't be this much traffic out here. Down in Mexico, something I noticed up here in the United States, your car has to pass a safety inspection. It has to have turn signals and headlight taillights, and the car has to basically be intact. And I go down to Mexico and I saw cars that you would have thought they were abandoned in a ditch 20 years ago. And they driving them on the road. Now, they don't have a bumper, they don't have a hood, they don't have a grill, they don't have fenders. It's like something a little kid built. They're driving them on the roads. Right on, guys, right on. I guess they don't. As long as it'll motor along, I guess you're okay. Yeah, I got on a mailing list for some kind of spam callers, and my phone rings from certain phone numbers. If you answer it, you're acknowledging that you're a good phone number. And if you do answer, it'll listen and hang up on you, and then it'll tell the computer, oh, there's somebody on the other end of this. You can call and sell them stuff or something. So you just learn how to disconnect the phone and just hang up and block it. And they use another fake number. You block that one. You just keep on blocking them. And every once in a while on my phone, it'll say phone call blocked because it's one of the previous numbers they tried to do it to. And you can't get them to stop. Motor in. So this is what 62 miles an hour looks like, which is literally, let me back up here a little, 100 kilometers per hour is what I'm doing if you're using a different system. Back up again. There we go. I got a rest area coming up in about 25 miles. I'm going to get off. I got to refill my water bottles at this point. Oop, another one. Another highway patrol. Call that one. We got highway patrol in the median marker 111.6. Looks like he's watching westbound. Alrighty. Universal Uno, you're back. We are on I-94 westbound through Michigan, probably centered between Detroit and Lake Michigan. Gonna follow the road around, down around the tip of the lake, zigzag through Chicago, pop out and go towards Liberty, Missouri is my target. It's got me getting in there about 11 o'clock tonight, dropping off looks like a shoebox. It's not very big. And from there, I'm going to have to head home to Texas. I got to get some work done to this van. I have 149,000 miles on it. My struts are shot, and the front end's starting to rattle when I hit little bumps because the struts are just worn out. And here a little while ago, I got a check engine light, so now I got to deal with that. It's probably another sensor. But my buddy at his shop, he can plug it in and tell me what's going on. I met a woman at our main headquarters that's driving the exact same van I have, and she has 665,000 miles on hers. So I am excited for that. She said the only heavy maintenance she's ever done was replaced a timing chain. I'm going to keep changing my fluids and not abusing this thing and hope it lasts. Yes, this is expediting. This is truck driving on a budget. Because I don't have a truck, I have a van. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to do. It's also easier to get into and easier to get back out of if you don't like it. Get into trucking, it's a little more complicated. Anybody got a topic of babbling or a question? Political comment, lyrics to a new song, favorite brand of peanut butter. We're pretty much wide open here. Got some trivia for you. Ever notice barns are red? Usually a barn is painted red. And you say, well, why? Tradition? Well, if you take raw wood, trim it, cut it, make a barn, and you don't treat it in any way, the wood will start to warp and rot. Rainwater will soak in. You've seen it. Besides old buildings. There was something in the... Keep dropping this feed for some reason. How often do you change your engine oil? All right, universal Uno, sorry. I have a sensor in here that tells me when to change the oil. And as of, hold on, right now, I've got 63% left on this one. And it roughly turns into 10,000 miles. I can't get anybody to tell me if it's actually the mileage or if the computer is just testing the oil. I can't get anybody to tell me which it is. And I have some basic tools in here. I don't want to brag about my mechanical abilities because I don't have any, but I have some basic tools and an oil pan, and I buy oil. I run straight synthetic, and I found that I can get it delivered by Amazon cheaper than you can buy it in the store. And so I keep oil filters, which are under my passenger seat, and a 5-quart jug of oil in here all the time, and then I'll just whip into a parking lot. I got to get that right wheel off the ground, right front wheel, because you slide an oil pan under here and that's all the space you have. You can't get to anything. It's just there's not enough room. So I got to get a big rock or something or a curb to get this van up off the ground, and I get under there and change it. And then you can take old oil to any auto parts store and they accept it. They have recycling facilities there. So as far as I can tell, it's roughly every 10,000 miles. That's because of it's synthetic. Probably go further, but I don't want to. Rainy weather, check your windshield wipers. Oh yeah. When I first started out, I replaced my wiper blades. And a lot of people don't realize this, but if you get like a paper towel wet, you can lift the blade up and clean it, and it makes a much better streak because there is a little bit of a schmegma buildup on there. And I had to clean them yesterday. It was leaving one little line on the windscreen. I am getting 22.2 miles per gallon right now, doing 62, which for a van is pretty high. I can almost tickle 25 miles per gallon in this thing occasionally, as long as I just stay out here on the highway. I just drove by a casino. Casinos pop up on Indian reservations, so I'm guessing that's what this is. without having any other information to go on. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Did they help you?
Whoop, lost my cruise there for a second. I have something all over my foot. Huh. Where that came from? I have, looks like I spilled something on my foot, but I don't know where it's coming from. It's not on the floor. Huh. Like a dripping oil or something. Weird. Whoop, I got some ugly weather in the distance. Perchance rain, unknown at this time. My wife's, what is it, 26, 17? My wife's birthday is on the 1st. So I did not plan on going home, but since the van needs some heavy work on it, and I'm heading that way, that means I get to be home for my wife's birthday. That's kind of cool. And she is 6 days older than me, so that means I got 6 days to rub it in her face. So, old woman, what's the future like? She always says, you'll know in 6 days. But yeah, I got 6 days of fun coming. Me married to the older woman. Steel Bridge. Cargo freight has its ups and downs. There's certain times of year it's busy. There's certain times it's not so busy. There's kind of recently the Trump White House talked about removing non-English speaking drivers and people who can't communicate, which is out of Michigan. Oh geez, no, I still got a ways to go. I still got to hit the lake, turn south, and get all the way down there by the tip of Lake Michigan before I get out of the lake. I'm talking about these getting rid of drivers who can't be running on a CDL that can't speak English. What the job that I do is as an expediter is we're carrying 1 or 2 pallets, in my case a box, and what happens is there's a lot of little independent operators out there, and there's a bunch of big companies that do this. And there's kind of a generic figure. It costs X amount of dollars per mile to move from here to there. You know, depends on if it's direct or you got a couple days. There's a bunch of variables, but there's a generic dollar figure you work with. And these vans are all physically safe. They have to pass all the safety inspections. They are heavily insured. They're insured empty, and then you have a whole different policy loaded, which is expensive, which is really annoying. But what had happened there for a while is these dudes would come rolling into the country, get their free government money, tax dollars, and then they turn around and buy a burned up 1,000,000-mile van. They don't have a driver's license. They don't have any kind of insurance. And they just decide to jump into the business of hauling freight. Got another one coming up. And these guys would come out here and start doing what I'm doing, uninsured, in an unsafe vehicle. So the load boards, a company would put a load out and people bid it and they give it to you and they go, well, they were putting loads out and people bid it and then it would just sit there and nothing would happen. And we would watch it and go, what's going on? Well, they never called us back. Well, what they're waiting on is one of these cutthroat, uninsured, illegally operating vans to step in and take the load for nothing. And then when they wreck and they lose the load, then they can freak out and try to sue them. They're uninsured, it didn't matter. But it's like these shippers didn't care. And that was kind of a sad state of affairs, that we were missing out on work because there's somebody cutting corners and doing it illegally and uninsured. And the shippers were like, yeah, that's great. We'll do this. It's cheaper. As soon as they crash and they lose that load, then what are you going to do? Oh, well, we'll scream and cry and sue them. Well, you know, yeah, there's a lot of clouds coming on. And that went on for a while, and that actually knocked quite a few people out of business. And this was right around the time the Brandon administration got in there and the gas prices took off. And it got to where you couldn't afford to drive. I mean, period. The Jazz, I'm trying to bumpy road here. The Jazz something. The Jazz. The writing is so small on the screen in this light I can't read. That says the Jazz something. But high back. We are on Interstate 94 in Michigan, heading westbound. We're transitioning from Dearborn, Michigan to Liberty, Missouri, from a Ford plant to a Ford plant. And I have a box in here that's it looks like I hold a set of boots. It's just not that big. And it says I'll get there about 11 o'clock tonight. It took, from the time I got on the plant, it took a breath under 2 hours to pick this load up because I was being sent on a goose chase trying to find where to pick it up. And they just couldn't answer the question. It was a maddening way to spend a morning. Maddening. But we're going now. Gas up here is really expensive, and it looks like I'm going to run out before I get out of the state, so I'm going to have to stop and put in just enough to get me out and out the other side so I can get gas in Iowa. It drops like 50 cents a gallon. It's trying to rain. Oh, I got a long one here. Orange loaf. How about the other lady sitting in the wheelchair? Yeah. It's raining. Yeah, it's thinking about it. Whoa, here we go. Yeah, this guy's driving into it. It's hardcore. Certain motorcycles, like the Gold Wings and whatnot, they're designed that if you're driving and it starts raining, the shape of the windscreen and the frame will actually keep you dry. But if you have to slow down, you're pretty much out of it. If I'm going to spend, I'm not going to spend any time near Kansas City because, like I said, I got to go home. Do you try Indian food fat? To my knowledge, I've never had Indian food. If I have, I don't know what it was. I don't really know what kind of food they have over there. Air National Guard. It's trying to rain. Whew. Veterans Affairs. The biggest drive I've done with the van, it was Niagara Falls, which is near Buffalo, New York, to Los Angeles. And I got to follow the Cannonball route that I took. So I followed 80 all the way to western Nebraska, and then 76 goes down to the southwest into Denver, and then you hit 70, go through Denver, up over the mountains into central Utah, hit 15, turn left, go south, goes through Vegas, and goes into LA from there. And being that I was on the sleep schedule of being on the East Coast, when I got to the Pilot Flying J in extreme western Nebraska, I went and took a shower, went to bed, got up in the morning. It was pitch black outside when I started driving because I was wide awake early, and I went across the border into Colorado, and the sun was coming up behind me, and the sky was almost unreal blue, and the clouds were perfectly chiseled, and the mountains had little snow peaks, little bits of snow on them. And it was like wheat fields, but it was cut down, and the sun was bouncing off of it. And just again, the sun was behind me, and it was absolutely gorgeous. What they call the golden hour, the first hour after sunrise and the hour before sunset for filming. It was freakishly gorgeous, and I wasn't streaming or doing anything. I was just looking. I took pictures of it, but it was such a wonderful feeling driving through there. There was nobody around, just me on the road, thumbing along, enjoying the view. I'd love to have that experience again because I really, really enjoyed that. There's a lot of cars on the road for 45 in the afternoon. This is kind of weird. See this guy in front of us with a ski rack? Bike rack, whatever the heck that thing is? That is an aerodynamic nightmare for your car. That dude's probably losing 3 miles per gallon driving around with that thing on top of his car. If you have a rack on your roof and it's just up there for a fashion statement, get it off. It literally makes a difference. Got a guy getting ready to pass us. He's got a rack on his roof, but he's got like racks on it or something. So he's going somewhere. But when you're done carrying your equipment, get the rack off the top. Everybody plays a big miles from now. Okay, I keep using this feed, so I'm going to end here and hopefully pick this up later on. Today. What do we end up with? Not very much.